My guest today is a force in the problem gambling space. In a few short years, he's gone from being an active addiction to reaching millions of people through his company, ODAT Gambling Awareness. Please welcome to the Modern Meeting, Rob Minnick. Rob, welcome.
Adam, thanks for having me on, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate the warm welcome.
absolutely. Um, I mean, I so there's two things that I've been writing questions about. Obviously, number one, I want to hear your story because I haven't really heard the details. But then number two, I don't know what's more impressive, your ability to stay away from a bet or what you've done with ODAT. I mean, they're equally just amazing. But I guess
Thanks, man.
let's start from the beginning. So I know that you're a young guy, but you still had a good amount of years out there. Take me back to the beginning. How did it start?
Yeah, so I usually start the story being 18 when I got started with daily fantasy sports. But I'd say, thinking back even further than that, there was plenty of instances where gambling was present or like gambling like behavior. So I grew up in a family that we had little poker games for a couple of cents with my great aunt and uncle when we'd go to their house for basically they had like most holidays over there. So we had that present. And then my brother's 4 years younger than me. So when I was like 12, 13 years old, I was like a lot bigger than he was because, puberty and whatever. And so I was giving him basically a spread to keep him playing with me when we were playing sports outside. So we would have like this hockey set and he wouldn't want to play because he would lose all the time. So I'd say, okay, well, you're gonna start up 5 goals, and we're gonna play to 9 or something like
Wow.
that, right? So it ended up
Yeah.
making the games like even. We weren't playing for money or anything, but
Right.
this idea was like always kind of around, right? So now, flash forward, I'm turning 18, and my friends and I were always watching the Phillies, Sixers, and Eagles, and sometimes the Flyers games, depending on they were kind of crappy by the time we were 18,
Mm.
but we were always watching the games when we were hanging out. Any kind of like family event, chilling with my dad, mom, brother. We were usually watching a game of some kind. And so because it was like this center focal point, when we found out about daily fantasy sports, which for those listening that don't know what it is like a full fantasy football season compressed into maybe one game. And when we found out about that, it was like a no brainer. We were going to do it because basically it looked like, hey, we can make money doing what we're already doing. And so when I say we, I'm referring to like me and like 3 or 4 of my friends in high school. Um, we're all like former athletes or current athletes in high school. And then we were like, wow, like let's give this a shot. And pretty much right off the bat, we started going in a much different direction from one another. So after the 7 o'clock Phillies game, it would be, I don't know, 9:30. Whether they won or they lost, would go to sleep. Me, whether I won or lost that contest, needed the West Coast baseball games, the Padres, the Angels, the Oakland Athletics, or wherever they are, whatever they're called now.
Mm.
Um, so I needed those, and my friends were content with the gamble, whether it won or it lost. I needed to continue whether it won or lost, and within probably I want to say 2 months, but I think it was probably less than that realistically. I started doing regular sports betting with a website called Bovada. By this point, I had found out like where I was going to college, which is in Washington D.C., and I used the address of the college to sign up for the website. Basically, Bovada was one of those like gray market sports books that
Mm.
in New Jersey at the time wasn't legal, but it was in D.C. And so, or I guess it wasn't illegal in DC is a better way of saying it.
Right.
So I was already putting my money into that, but I was working at an ice cream store for like 8.38 an hour at this point. And the idea that I could turn $8 into $20 or into $100, it was like already at the age of 18, I was like, why would I keep working my job if I could do this instead?
Sure.
Um, and
And when
yeah.
it no, and when you guys were starting the daily fantasy, were you guys
Mhm.
under 18?
Actually, we were. I say we. I was 18. I would say the large majority of us were 18. So we had
Okay.
some June birthdays in there.
Yeah,
So
because otherwise it's still, how hard is it for someone who's under 18 to be able to bet online?
like when I get these kinds of questions now, my own experience doesn't even match the reality of today.
Right.
Like I understand, like if someone's like gambled 20 years ago, it's very, very different. I'd say it's very, very different compared to 5 years ago
Mm.
in the U.S. And so, I mean, back then it was pretty easy, and most parents didn't really see the trouble with fantasy sports in particular. So if their kid was 17, maybe you're using your dad's account to play the fantasy sports, but
Sure.
it wasn't seen on the same level as a sports book, like the back of an Italian deli break your leg kind of thing. This
Right.
was like, oh, my kid just wants to put $5 with his friends on this little thing, and it kind of resembled that. Now I
Yeah.
think it's even easier, and I've heard way too many stories of like kids stealing their parents' socials because the 18 and up gambling now is a lot different than it was back then. The
Mm.
18 and up gambling back then, 8 years ago, was daily fantasy sports. Now it's like Fliff and like Prize Picks, which is just a glorified sports book.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
That's crazy. So you go to college
Mhm.
and you're dabbling in sports betting. How does the gambling progress?
Yeah, I mean, it's just up and down, right? It's that standard. There's some wins along the way. I pick up a bookie in between the time that I graduate high school and go off to college, and the bookie's giving out like a credit line. So for those that don't know how like a bookie kind of operates, you're not really gambling with your own money per se. He gives you a specific amount of credit. In my case, I think it was at the time, I don't know, like $2,000 or $3,000 a week, which I could not repay as an 18-year-old, right? But like, it's
Right.
never about the dollar amounts anyway. But just to kind of give a reference. So what would happen would be like on a Sunday, the week would begin, and on the following Sunday, the week would end, and you'd either have to Venmo him however much you lost, or he would Venmo you however much you won on Monday, and you would just basically reset the credit line. Um, but yeah, I picked up one of those credit lines going into college, and I would say that I really didn't go very far out of my way to make friends in college, especially like I feel like at a school like I went to, like Georgetown, it's very small, and a lot of your friendships were very situational. So a lot
Mm.
of people that lived together freshman year or lived next to each other freshman year ended up being friends for 4 years, maybe more than that. In my case, I kind of like talked to the couple people that I had to talk to, and then we kind of isolated and was
For
just
sure.
gambling. And I remember when it came to kind of its first peak for me was in March of 2018. So that's the second semester of my first year of college. And up until that point, I had had some wins. Maybe I was up a little bit of money. It wasn't significant, but I felt like gambling was becoming something that could be my full time job, or this is something I could aspire to get better at. And I remember it was the year that UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, beat Virginia. It was the first time a 16 seed in the March Madness tournament upset a 1 seed. And I didn't gamble on that game. And I think that looking back over my entire experience with gambling, the most frustration that I would feel is when I missed an obvious winner. Though,
Mm.
of course, that wasn't obvious. It was the first time it ever happened. But at the time, I
Right.
told myself it was.
Right.
And so to make up for it, basically, I put everything that I had access to on them to win their next game, which they lost to Kansas State by like 9 or 10 points. And I had my back up against a wall for the first time, where I knew I was going to have to pay the bookie in a day. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I have an absolute lock tonight. Like, I need you to extend me some more credit. He basically doubled my credit line for the one night that was left in the week, because of course he did. Why wouldn't
Right.
he?
Yeah.
And I ended up losing on a spring training baseball game because that was the only thing that was on that last day. And that was the first time that I had to tell my family that I had gambled too much. I didn't say I had a gambling problem. I said I
Mm.
made some bad decisions. And they were like, he could have been like snorting coke. He could have been like tripping on acid. I guess this is a better alternative. You made a mistake. It's a kid, right? Like, that's their thoughts. My thoughts is like, okay, if I pay my parents, it's going to be interest free, so I can keep gambling. Like, immediately had that thought.
And
Um,
and they had no reason to think otherwise because you had pretty much hid the gambling from them till that point, right?
I not that I hid it. It just there was not that much to hide yet.
Right. Right.
They
Right.
they knew that I had a bookie actually because there was one time I had a win and I wasn't home. The bookie was located in New Jersey, and it was a significant enough win that he wouldn't Venmo it. And my mom had to drive to the kid's house and pick it up in an envelope of cash. And
Wow.
so it looked I was like, "Yo, this is the coolest thing ever, like, isn't it, mom?" And she was like, "Don't do it again," kinda thing,
Right.
and
Right.
then I
Right.
did it
Right.
anyway.
Now,
Uh,
growing up in that area, obviously you weren't 21 yet, so you couldn't
mhm.
really go to AC. But like, what was your take on like casino culture? And did you ever have an urge to go to the casino?
Mm. There was a lot of trips to the casino before I was 21. They weren't to gamble though, but if you're in like the kind of the shore area where Atlantic City is, and you're looking for family entertainment, you're looking for restaurants, you're looking for shopping, it's all kind of conglomerated into the same strip as the casinos there.
Mm,
And sometimes they're in the casinos. The best restaurants rated in South Jersey are in the casinos.
yeah.
So there was plenty of times that I was there. I always thought it was cool. I always thought it's something that I would want to do one day, but I actually never gambled in a casino underage. Interestingly, I guess, because I
Yeah.
did most of the other things you could do wrong.
Right, right. Now, we hear this all the time on podcasts in 12-step meetings. You know, you hear someone's story and you see them now and you say,
Mm,
"Oh my God, I cannot picture you being out there thinking like this, acting like this."
mm,
You may be the number one example of that because I mean, what you've done with ODAT and just, the marketing and just the way that you have totally just honestly, like you've changed the game. And as you're describing how you're feeling in 2018, what do you attribute, like when you look back and think of those moments when you are clearly just out of control?
mm.
How do you explain that to someone who's like, I don't believe it? Like this guy who has, you know what I mean? Like, how do you
Yeah.
explain it to people?
Uh, it's not the easiest thing, I guess, when you put it like that, because outwardly to especially like I'm gonna call them an adult. I mean, I'm 26, but like when I say adult, I mean like someone my mom and dad's age. When I see like an adult, I speak in a very well-mannered or eloquent way that's not really that reflective of like my actual thoughts. Not
Mm,
that I'm being like a fake person, but I think I'm a good communicator. And so it does often come as a surprise to people like the things that I've done because
yeah,
they're really bad.
yeah,
But I think that good communication can mask a lot of underlying problems, and that probably makes me sound like a devious like narcissist or something. I don't know, but but
no, but
like
I get what you're
honestly,
saying. I
and
get what
there's
you're
been
saying.
some character growth. I mean, I've become a bit of a better person, still working through some things, but like back in like high school and into college, I mean, we were crushing like a six pack of beer, throwing it into our neighbor's lawn, and then like driving around. Like that's the kind of stuff that we were doing. I think
Right.
a lot of high school kids can probably relate to that, unfortunately. So the high risk types of activities that I was doing, drinking, smoking, gambling, it was like a second life that no one really saw, but it was what my friends saw, I would say.
Yeah. And I guess also too, just like when you said that after a year or two in your second semester, you're seriously contemplating like gambling for a living.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like it's just I guess that's just your lack of life experience. Like we all
Mm,
thought that way, right? Like I'll never forget the first poker tournament I won. I thought I was going to play poker the rest of my life.
sure.
But I guess it just speaks to the disease. Um but so you get that bailout from your parents,
Mm.
you're paying them back interest free. What happens next?
Yeah, and I mean, combining that with the thought of like, I want to turn this into a profession. It's just like what I always felt was I went to school, I did well, I did clubs and activities that bolstered a resume so that I could apply to a school. And then I was supposed to use that school to get a good job. It always felt like I was on a very specific track that
Mm,
I didn't necessarily choose. Maybe a lot of like people who are newly into college might be feeling that same way. It's just like you've been told what to do for so long, and then you finally get to this point where you have a little bit more freedom and bad things become kind of the draw. So when I say I wanted to be a professional gambler, the reason that was the case wasn't because I wanted to be like super rich. I mean, I wouldn't have minded, of course, but it wasn't that. It was I was finally doing something that I was choosing for myself that no one
oh,
told me to do. In fact, people were telling me quite the opposite. Don't do that. And so that made
right.
me want to do it more. And
Mm,
so when I was paying back my parents, I spent that summer following freshman year of high school or freshman year of college, basically working 70, 80-hour weeks. I was doing delivery shifts. I was working as a host at an Applebee's. And it was delivering pizza and Chinese food. I was working a lot, not making a ton, but paying them back.
mm,
During that whole time, I got a new bookie. I was doing more online betting, but I was making like a set regular payment to my parents. And by the end of the summer, it was paid off, and I didn't have any debt going into the second year.
mm.
So what was kind of going through my head was like, okay, clean slate. You made some bad bets, you made some bad decisions. It wasn't gambling's a problem. It's that you are not yet the gambler that you were meant to be or meant to become. So there was room for growth. And that false belief that growth was possible in a game that was designed for you to lose is what led me to continue to do it for 4 or 5 more years after that. Uh, I'd
And
say
what
this. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and was the focus going to be sports betting, or did it eventually get into casinos?
Yeah, so the focus was definitely sports betting, but it did get into casinos. The thing was that in my head, I viewed things really particularly. So I viewed sports betting and then eventually poker when I was 21, which we can get into in a little bit, as not only games of skill, but games of progress, games of improvement, games of knowledge. And so if I continued to study, if I continued to practice, that I would get better and I would become a successful gambler in those cases. I didn't carry the same delusion for casino games. So what I viewed them as, which, believe me, I was playing them for 8 hours a day, but I viewed them as fun, right? So I viewed my sports betting and poker as my job and the casino games as like my way to blow off steam.
Interesting.
Mm.
I've never heard it as you said a game of progress. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean that's just it's so true, especially with poker. I mean, I've met I mean, working in the industry, I've met so many people that they convince you that they're a professional poker player, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they fall off the face of the earth, and that's not a coincidence. It's that you the the margin is just so razor thin. Like,
Mhm.
would you agree? Like, I mean, it's almost like trying to become an actor. Like to become a professional poker player, it's like the top 1%. Would you say?
Yeah, so when I make content about like poker, what I usually say is like because it's easy, it's just easier to blanket it and say like you're going to lose money if you play because for 99.99% that's true. I would say that the reason that I hate going down that route is because it implies that you can become that top 1%, even if it's
Exactly.
unlikely.
Yeah.
And I think that the reality is to get into that top 1%, it's not just yourself, it becomes a business in and of itself involving staking, sponsorships, like things that sustain you during downtrends and like
Right.
minus what no, it's called it like a downswing. Um, and so like other than the 8 people you might see on TV that play like the $100 million poker games, you're not going to go that direction.
Yeah.
Like I've interviewed, and you should interview this guy. His name's Greg Weber. He was a poker pro, and he ended up losing all of his money chasing his losses, gambling, and it was a
Yeah.
mixture of poker and casino. But the line is so thin that it almost doesn't exist.
For sure. And I want to keep going with your story, but you keep
Mhm.
bringing up these amazing points, and I have to ask follow-up questions. So you're talking about staking, and you're talking about how it's essentially not reality. I
Mhm.
got to ask you about these YouTubers right now.
Sure.
I know that you're very familiar with them. I'm not gonna lie, like I watch their videos, like the Bretskys and the Bluffs and the Vegas Mats of the world.
Mhm.
Explain to the audience, kind of what they're doing, and in your opinion, like, I mean, I think it's literally maybe almost on the same level as the DraftKings saying, "Give us $5, we'll give you 200."
Yeah.
What do you think about them?
I think they're both bad. When I say the streamers versus like the standard operator advertising,
Mm,
they're bad for different reasons. So the streamers are the best way to view them is they're paid actors. They are gambling, but oftentimes they're not gambling with their own money. They're using site credit that's been given to them to inflate their balance to make it more interesting to watch. They're also sometimes playing with different RTPs. So what that means is like the owner of the casino has hired them to stream themselves playing, and they've changed the payout structure of the game to make it more likely for them to win. So that was a big thing in the CS:GO sites that were operated by the group called FaZe Clan. They ended up no one ended up following through on the investigation, but they were essentially changing the structure of their casino to mislead their audience into signing up thinking that they would win. And so we see the same kind of thing where if Drake sits down with a balance of $20 million and he keeps spinning a $10,000 spin on a slot machine, eventually he's going to hit for $10 million. Now they're going to show you, they're going to clip that. That's going to be their big performer video on whatever platform they're putting it out on, and that's going to get you to come in on the stream. Then you're going to see him having a bunch of fun with a bunch of models and celebrities smoking hookah, having the most expensive drinks that you can buy, and showing you this lifestyle that looks fantastic. So you sign up because you want that too. The problem is he's being paid to do it, and it's not his actual money. So it doesn't matter to him if he wins or loses. But you, it is your real money. And then Drake actually gets paid a portion of your losses forever. So it's in his best interest to show you only the best possible aspects of what he's doing. Now, the standard operator things like the bet $5, win 200, that's particularly dangerous because it's a really strong on ramp. The offers that are given out are getting people to go in and sign up. The first bet isn't the problem. It's not the fact that you win $200. It's the fact that you don't actually get $200 of cash. You get
Mm,
$200 in free bets. Then you have to wager the $200 X number of times before you're allowed to cash it out. So
right.
then you get to this point where you're like, wow, this is so much fun. Maybe I'll just leave half this money in and I'll withdraw the other half. And then you lose the half that you left in, you put the other half back in, and you slowly end up in a situation where you're putting in your own money. They've created a lifelong customer through addiction.
Yeah. I mean, I you put it so perfect that these guys are paid actors. And you know, when I think of what I was like 10, 15 years ago,
Mhm.
if I was watching these videos, I mean, I was already a maniac out there doing exactly what they're doing on the craps table. But if I honestly probably would have tried to be one of them. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And it's so scary to think that right now there's a 18 or 19-year-old person out there watching those videos, and then all of a sudden, let's say they comment on Bretsky's video, you click on their icon, and they got 15 subscribers, and they're trying to do the same shit, but
Yep.
they're using their own money and they're
Yep.
losing,
Hmm.
and that's why it just seems criminal to me. It really
Yeah.
does. I know that's might sound dramatic, but I
I think
mean,
it's there.
you know,
Have you
um,
ever have you ever seen The Social Dilemma?
nah, no.
I think if you watch it, it'll kind of explain to anyone in the audience that watches it, it'll kind of explain why younger people in particular who are very adept at social media convince themselves of very extreme opinions. And one extreme opinion in the gambling space is I'm going to be a professional gambler, like I believe. Now, to really dumb it down and sum it up, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, they don't care at all if you are addicted to gambling or if you gamble. They just care that you watch the next video. But if you are addicted to gambling, the thing that you're going to find most engaging is whatever verifies your opinion in your head that
Of
gambling is
course.
profitable.
Hmm.
So you're going to see a bunch of videos of people winning. But TikTok doesn't care what the video is. They just care that you keep scrolling. So they're going to keep recommending videos that mirror what keeps you on the app longer. And so it creates this vacuum where you only see things that confirm your own bias. So you keep seeing the same thing over and over again, telling you this is good, this is good, this is good. You never see the opposite because you would click off and they wouldn't get their ad revenue. So it
Right.
actually morphs opinion, and it's the same with any kind of politics or any kind of belief.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary, man. It really is. So back to your story. I know we're
Mhm.
bouncing around, but
Yeah.
I think we're doing good. um, so you mentioned that you eventually got into poker, and
Mhm.
you were still a few years away from essentially getting help. Take us
Mhm.
through those last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that sophomore year of college is a total blur, and there's nothing that I can think of that was notable. It was the same up and down. Junior year comes around, and I'm feeling depressed. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with my life, but I am not happy. Obviously, looking back, it was I'm addicted to gambling. Of course, I'm friggin' sad. I'm losing all my money, X, Y, Z. But at the time, I didn't feel like that, and so I was like, what can I do to change this? Let me study abroad. Let me go and try to change my location, see if I can change the way I'm feeling about my life. And I looked, and the only places that I could go, and it was January at this time, were England, Scotland, and Australia. So I wasn't going to go to England or Scotland; it would have been winter. So I go to Australia; it's their summer. Turns out, little known fact, Australia has the highest rate of gambling losses per capita in the world, and one of the highest rates of gambling addiction.
Wow.
So I think it was about double as bad as anywhere else in terms of gambling losses per capita. But I was like, "Oh, that's awesome! I can gamble at 18, or it was 19, I think. It was some weird law, but I was good to gamble. I was 20 years old, um, And so I took a flight from JFK in New York to Sydney, which took about 25, 26 hours or so
Oof.
with a layover. Yeah, it was rough. I don't want to do that again. But instead of going to sleep, instead of going to meet the people that I would live with, instead of doing any of that, I went straight to the Star Casino in Sydney because I saw they had a poker room and I wanted to play because I had been playing with my family, like this is something I know how to do. And I'd
Mm.
spend like 8 hours there the first day. And basically, I'd be there every single day. This was kind of the first time that I was regularly attending like an in person casino. And the only reason was that I didn't have a permanent Australian address. So I couldn't sign up for a sports book on the phone. But luckily for me, every single bar and restaurant in Australia has a TAB machine. Don't know what it stands for, but it's basically a vending machine for sports bets, and you
Holy
can you can
shit.
basically gamble wherever you're at. They also have slot machines in the back of most pubs called pokies, which function as just regular slot machines. And then they had one very very specific law that backfired so hard for me. Basically, like 3 or 4 months before I got there, they had this string of alcohol fueled violence. And so their solution was we need to close the bars and pubs earlier so that people drink less. But there was one single entity in all of Sydney that had an exemption from that rule, the Star Casino in
Mm.
Sydney. And so every night at like 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on the day of the week, you'd see this mass migration of drunk teenagers and like 20-year-olds going from whatever bar they were at over to the casino so they could keep drinking. So that was actually probably their busiest time was whenever the bars closed and everyone mass migrated. But that was my life for like 2.5 months of just every single day, no matter what day of the week it was, drinking, smoking, gambling. Of course, finding myself losing money, calling my family, having them wire money over, all the usual stuff a gambling addict will do to get more money to keep going. But then COVID hit, and they sent us back right as I turned 21. So I land back in America. Now I'm in lockdown for the next year, 18 months, whatever it might have been. Uh, 18 months sounds like too much, but it actually could have been. So I'm in lockdown. I'm now 21, and I qualify for $13 of unemployment from the job that I had on campus. But if you remember the rules during COVID, there were some really particular rules.
Plus 600.
Plus 600. So every week I would get a deposit directly into my bank account of just fully disposable income
That's
because I was
insane.
back at home. And what I started doing was playing online poker tournaments. And of course, there were some wins, but way more losses. But it
Because you're in
convinced me.
Jersey,
Yeah.
WSOP, right?
Yeah, it was Poker Stars, but yeah, all the same
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it convinced me I could be a professional poker player now. I was like, oh, well, I have the time to read and study. I bought the what's the name? Brunson Doyle. I bought his book and I was like, oh, I'm going to read this and I'm going to win. And then, of course, you win a tournament. You're like, wow, I'm really good. Not that like you weren't just getting lucky the whole time. But basically, I was doing that and casino games online until Korean baseball came back on. And then I got back into sports betting. And this was all when I was 21. We moved back to school for the fall semester, but we can't leave the house there either. And so now I'm with three friends, living with three friends, and we're all gambling every day. I'm hiding the amounts that I'm playing because I'm gambling more than them, but it's like finally this communal feeling that I was seeking, like this validation that someone else is doing what I'm doing, even if it's not as much. And basically, time warp. A year goes by of living every single day on repeat, like Groundhog Day, just waking
Yeah.
up, gambling all day, going to sleep, doing the same thing.
And just in case anyone didn't hear that, he said Korean baseball. You're
Yeah,
betting on you're
it was the
betting on
first sport back
Korean
on.
baseball game at like 2 in the morning or something.
Yeah, it was the only sport. So like, if people were addicted to gambling during COVID, there was like uh, Greek esports simulators, and that was the first thing that was on during COVID. That became like wildly popular. It was like FIFA playing in Greek, and then you could bet on the game as if it was a real game. And
Holy
then it
shit.
was Korean baseball. Then it was the NBA bubble came back,
Mm.
and I think it went in that order.
Now, during all this chaos so far that we've talked about,
Yeah.
did you have any big wins that kind of solidified your, career path that you thought you were on?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it all kind of blurs together, which probably sounds like a cop out kind of answer, but like during that time, there were plenty of times where I was down to like my last couple bucks and I'd have like a miraculous hit. One that pops to mind, which was a couple years before COVID, was like when LeBron missed that layup against the Wizards,
Mm.
and then he turned around and hit that like fall away three to send it to overtime, and then they won. I was betting on that game, and I had the Cavs, and I remember like just bouncing around the room. Same with like a LaMarcus Aldridge rebound total hitting
Yeah.
over and like winning like 5 or 6 grand, and I was like, oh, I'm back,
Yeah,
kind of
see,
thing.
that's amazing. I
Yeah,
mean, in the worst way possible, but
yeah. No, that was my life though. It was
yeah,
just
no,
like,
for sure.
and it was these were like miraculously lucky things, but I never viewed it as lucky. I viewed it as that was what was supposed to happen,
Hmm.
which was like the
Oh, for
most
sure.
dangerous thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your COVID is, it's not over, but it's opening back up, and it seems like in the timeline you're about a year, less than 2 years away from finally getting help. Take us through those last
Yeah.
final days and years.
Yeah, so I graduate college, then I break up with the girl that I was dating pretty much the whole time I was in college. The relationship had kind of deteriorated for a couple of reasons, but one of them was just that I didn't really find myself present in too many moments. I was more concerned with the gambling, the debt, really the stress of like, how am I going to cover this? Where am I going to get money from this? Taking anger out on others around me.
And
Um,
was she like, did she have any idea?
Yes. Oh, she yeah. Yeah. So I'm one of those cases where I didn't really keep secrets from I've never kept secrets from the person that I was dating.
Mm,
Um in fact, she came from a very wealthy family. I won't go into too much detail with it, but she came from like a very wealthy family, and she
hmm.
was funding a lot of the gambling as well.
Yeah.
Um so when we broke up, it was like a no contact situation, like just kind of a bad breakup, and I was pretty down. And what I had essentially done is I had booked like a ticket to visit her. So she was from Greece, and in the summers, like we went to Greece, and so I had a ticket, and I couldn't cancel it. I couldn't get a refund on it, so I could only change the destination. Ended up taking a trip to Rome, which turned out to be one of the best trips of my life with my friends. But I can remember, gambling through all that. In fact, I remember like basically gambling away all the money I had left, with like 3 days left in the trip, and then having to borrow money from my friends to get through it.
Mm.
But while I was there, I met a who would become my next girlfriend, and she was from Romania, like the furthest place possible, but whatever. And so I was like, okay, I want to meet up with you. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? Can we go to Paris? And I said that with no money. Like I had nothing left. And she was like, yeah, like let's go like next month. And I was like, okay, sure. And like a couple weeks go by, and I hit a big win. And I'm like, yes, I can go. I'm going to book the ticket. And so I booked the ticket, and I flew out to Paris. And within like 2 hours of being there, we had met up, and we got to like the hotel. And within 2 hours of being there, I'm like, all right, I'll be right back. And I go off to the bathroom, and I sit there for like a half hour, and I'm spinning slots online, and they're in French. I don't even know what they're saying, but I seeing like little wins along the way. I sat there for like literally an hour by the end of it, and spun away all of the money that I had won. So I had nothing left for the rest of the trip again.
Come on.
And that was a big moment for me because it was the first time that I ever asked myself, like, why did you just do that? And I didn't have a viable excuse, because big losses before was like, I was confident that team was going to win. I did my research and I got unlucky. I was doing this. I bet a little bit too much. I got unlucky. I thought this would work out. It didn't. That time when I was sitting there, I was like, I have no idea why I just did that. I'd always told myself I wanted to win enough that I could travel the world, do whatever I wanted. And I was traveling the world, doing whatever I wanted on some random Wednesday afternoon, and I'm still sitting there spinning slots, chasing after another win. And it was just like, I don't know why I'm doing that. And so when I came back, I ended up going to my first GA meeting. It was February 8th of 2022.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
And
whoa, whoa, whoa.
yeah,
That's my clean date.
yeah, February 8th.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
That's not mine, but it was my
But
first
dude,
one.
come on. So February 8th, 2022, you and I were both in a G. Oh my
Yeah.
God. That's
Yep.
crazy.
I wish that was still my date, but
Oh, so
about
sorry. That just hit me like a ton of bricks. Okay,
ah,
so
you're good.
keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No,
Holy
you're good, bro.
shit.
I um I was doing really well, for especially for the first couple of months after that. I rebuilt my finances up, and I was going to meetings every single week. I had my sponsor. I was working the steps. I was working a bunch of jobs to try to build my money back up. And then, like 8, 9 months into it, I start feeling like sorry for myself.
Mm,
Like I get these thoughts of like, you wasted so much time, you wasted so much money, you're so far behind your friends, like, what are you doing? You don't even like your job, you're bored, you don't have a purpose, like these kinds of thoughts. And on November the 12th, 2022, I was like, screw it. I'm going to go back to gambling. I made one bet in the morning. Honestly, swear to God, just cannot even remember what it was anymore. It was a sports bet and it hit for like a couple of $1,000. And I was like, I feel like shit. I need to withdraw this money right away, get back to a meeting. Like I had 9 months clean. I screwed this up. Even though I won, I was like upset about it. And so I tried to withdraw the money. It was the Parks Casino app in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and there was a 24-hour delay period. So I think the rule was after you make a withdraw or a deposit, you can't withdraw for 24 hours until it's like cleared.
Mm-hmm.
So some bullshit. But I was like, okay, well, that's unacceptable. I need to stop gambling and close this account and self-exclude today. I'm gonna go to Parks. It's in Bensalem, PA. It's like a 30-minute drive from where I was living in Philly. I was like, I'm gonna go to the cashier's desk and I'm gonna yell at them and make them pay me out. And then they just told me the same thing. They're like, hey, these are just kind of the rules of the app. Sorry. And I was like, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna take it out on this person. It's not their fault. I turn around and now I'm in a casino. I'm up a couple $1,000 and I'm 2 hours since my last bet. And I go, well, I guess I could just, gamble the until I break back even. And then it's like this never happened at all anyway. Well, that led to a 12-hour binge session where I maxed out 3 credit cards, pretty much played every game in the casino. Started off with a couple hours of poker. By the end of it, I was playing craps, blackjack, slots. Like, it was literally everything. But losing all that money isn't what kept me away from gambling following that day, because that is the last day that I gambled. What keeps me away is this thought that I had about 8 hours into the day. I had gone off to the bathroom and I had taken out with the cash advances. It was all bills. So I had a wad of cash like this thick with no rubber band or money clip. And it was more money than I could pay back to the bank with the fees that hit me from the cash advances. And I was like, whew, okay, let me just go to the bathroom, chill out for a minute. And I go into the bathroom. That money was in my pocket with my phone. And I went to reach in for my phone and all the money fell out onto the floor. And I scrambled and I picked it all up and I was like, "Oh my god, I hope no one saw that. I don't want to get robbed. I don't want anyone to see that. Did I pick it all up? Like, did I leave some? I don't know." And then I was like, "Oh, wait. Well, I might as well just throw that money back on the floor because if I don't, I'm just going to go out there and lose it anyway. If I put the money on the floor, someone could pick it up and leave with it and have a good day. That would be nice of me." I ended up picking it all up anyway, going back out, losing it all. But the thought was just once again kind of the same kind of thought I had in Paris 9 months before. What's the point? And I didn't have an answer. I was doing it just because I thought I was supposed to be doing it, and it wasn't viable anymore. So, following that day, that's when I got myself back into meetings and I started posting my story online. And in addition to that, self excluding from all the casinos I had access to and having my mom manage my bank account as a 24-year-old, which did not make for great conversation with anyone. I didn't want to really talk about it, but it didn't actually change anything functionally about my life.
Mm.
But I would say that making the content and beginning to find meaning and purpose in that is really what's helped to sustain the recovery, along with just kind of beating myself up enough times before I finally admitted the truth.
Yeah, I mean that is. I mean, I've watched a lot of your stuff, and I had not heard some of those details. That is just so powerful, and I can relate to so much of it. Before we get into post recovery and ODAT and everything, I gotta ask you. So, for those 9 months
Mhm.
that you were in recovery, you know, can you like, do you think at any point, like, were you working the program or were you just kind of checking a box going into the meeting? Like, did you get a
Mhm.
sponsor? When you first read the yellow book, like, how did it make you feel? Like, just give
Yeah.
me an idea of what those first 9 months were like.
It's fascinating because I think the answer that would make the most logical sense is for me to say I was checking a box, I was going through the motions, I didn't give it enough. That's not true. I mean, I got a sponsor, I was working through the 12 steps, I was going every single week. I was like really going above and beyond. I was writing in personal inventories, like I was really working at it.
Yeah.
Um the problem was that I became really good at not gambling, but I wasn't growing as a person or becoming better. And so it felt like I was just counting the number of days since it had been that I did the thing that gave me purpose. And even though I was working to try to become a better person, to try to make amends, to try to take that personal accountability, it still felt like I didn't have anything to care about other than a number that was going up, again, since the thing that I loved to do. So, what really changed in what is now my recovery was reestablishing a purpose. I did
Yeah.
not have one those 9 months.
And do you still attend meetings now, or
Hmm.
like what does your recovery look like now?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could attend more regularly than I do.
Yeah.
Before, when I would miss meetings, it was because I was being lazy or I was like thinking about gambling. Now, when I miss meetings, it's because I'm flying to a different state to speak about my gambling anyway. So my meetings have kind of also become conferences where I share my story and things like this where I share my story. But I do try to get to my Tuesday night meeting as often as I can.
Yeah.
It's turned into more of like a once every 3 weeks kind of thing, which
Hmm.
I would love if it wasn't. Um, but I'm really out of routine. That's
Yeah.
something that I'm struggling with now. It's not leading me to want to gamble, but it's leading me to kind of be mentally scattered and losing the present moment, which is
Hmm.
something that I only realize because I'm not gambling.
Sure. Yeah. And it's something that I think about too. Like, so I've been doing the podcast since November,
Mm,
and I'm putting so much time and effort, and I love it. But there are moments where I'm like, y- for me, this isn't a substitute for meetings for me, right? Like
mhm,
I feel like for me, and everyone's recovery is different, but like I still need to go to meetings. I still need to work the steps, and I can only imagine what that's like for you, especially early on when, I mean, you're like you said, you're flying all over the country, you're speaking, you're getting all this recognition, you're getting, literally fame, and at the end of the day, you're still just an addict who needs to stay away from a bet. So
yeah.
talk about just talk about that, and as far as, do you have any like do you have any moments where you need to kind of ground yourself
Mhm.
and kind of, just stay the course?
Yeah. It's interesting because the longer that I go from, the last bet, the more that the answers to those questions, like, don't actually revolve around gambling, but revolve around the same character defects. So, what I would say is, especially in the beginning, it was not really a routine disruption, to be making this content. It was that I was making TikToks out of my mom's basement. It was that I was just going to my meetings Tuesday night, and I was making them just fine. And then, the old timer in the meeting would say something like, "How's your podcast?" or something like that, and that was about it.
All
Uh,
right.
so I would say that the real routine disruption for me has come within the last 3 or 4 months, where it's really picked up in terms of people wanting to speak, making content, filming around the country kind of thing. Um, Now what I would say now is the thing that I struggle with almost on a daily basis is this intense urge to not sit still or not slow down.
Mm,
And so I think that stems from feelings of guilt maybe because that might start from the time that I was gambling. And so to kind of like get this word vomit out there, what I'm saying is if I am not productive on a daily basis because I'm tired or because I flew from somewhere or like there's a disruption, I miss a meeting, someone's late to a recording for me, I get intensely anxious and angry. And the reason that I'm angry is because I feel like I'm not making progress. For years, my life was wake up, check on my bets, make more bets, check on those bets, make more bets, check on those bets. I accomplished nothing externally. And so I feel now like I have to compensate for that. Like I'm constantly on the move to try to make up for it, which kind of creates a overcompensation to the other side of being productive. Am I overdoing it? And I think the answer is probably yes. So that's what I'm dealing with now. Now that doesn't make me want to gamble, but what gambling would be in this scenario is the coping mechanism, is the escape. And so now
mm.
that there's not a coping mechanism and there's not an escape, what do I do with my thoughts? What do I do with feelings of anger and anxiety? And that's something that I still have to work with today.
Yeah, that's it's. I mean, what do you credit your? Have you always been this like? I just feel like you're very thoughtful and you're able to navigate your own thoughts. Have you always been that way, or is it something that you've
Mhm.
discovered through recovery?
I guess I've always been this way, but I used to use it for evil. If that, I guess I would say.
Yeah, totally.
I would work through my own thoughts in such a way to justify anything that I like deep down wanted to do.
For
Right? Like
sure.
I could eloquently tell you why I was going to become a professional sports bettor while I was
Mm,
living it. It wasn't that I was just deluding myself, or
mm.
I guess I was deluding myself. It wasn't like I was doing it for no reason. Is what I'm
Right,
getting
right.
at.
So you mentioned the TikToks in your mom's basement. I know that's how ODAT was kind of born. So take us through the first, few months in the early stages of ODAT, and like when did things start to gain traction, and when did it explode?
Yeah, I think that social media is this weird thing that it didn't used to be. I think it used to be like if you had a video that got a million views, you'd end up on Ellen and she'd be like asking you about like how fame feels and stuff like that, right? Like one of my first 10 videos on TikTok got like 1.3 million views and it changed objectively nothing about the success of the account, but it proved to me that it was possible, right? So it kind
Mm,
of served as mental motivation. But the reason that I started creating content was that after my relapse, I went back to my meetings, and very soon after, someone that was decently close in age to me stopped showing up. And I gave him a call, and he had gone back to gambling. Had a relapse due to some personal like issues going on to kind of cope with them. And I said, "Listen, man, God knows I don't know what the answer is here. You know, this is back in November 2022, but I know it's not going in gambling because I just screwed myself over. Don't make the same mistake that I just made."
mm.
Something about that conversation helped him. He came back in. He's been doing fantastic since that point. I didn't do
Amazing.
that, but I helped maybe in the thinking process of getting him back to the meetings. So I was like, that feels great. Let me like just record that same kind of thing. I'll put it on YouTube and then like a million people are going to see it. And so I recorded, I put it on YouTube, and I think 7 people saw it. 2 of them were my own account. One was my mom, one was my brother, one was my girlfriend, and I think 1 or 2 was like a random person that didn't watch very long. And so I basically gave up. I was like, "Oh, screw it. Like that's not it. Like I'll try something else." And my girlfriend said to me, "Hey, your video really sucked." And I said, "Oh, thank you. Like that's so nice of you." But she said it sucked because you were trying to be someone that you weren't. I was holding a
Mm,
microphone like this. I was talking to the camera like this, and I said, "My name is Rob, and I have a gambling addiction. Maybe you do too. Let's talk about it." Like that's what I sounded like on the
right,
camera, right?
right.
Because it was my first time. I didn't know what I was doing. The
Yeah.
microphone wasn't even plugged into anything. It was just running off camera. It was the iPhone mic. Um, but so I was like, okay, like what can I do to make this more like myself? She said, be more yourself by just trying to be fun, make it shorter, put it on TikTok. And I said, whatever, TikTok, the app for like the little kids who dance, like sure, whatever.
Right, right.
I record myself in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, which I got. Please sponsor me, guys. I love Dunkin' Donuts, always will. But I'm in a drive-through and I record myself talking about how roulette's not 50-50, which should be pretty obvious, but apparently it's not. 1.3, 1.4 million people see it. And then I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. I love TikTok. Let me see what I can do. I'm going to start posting every day.
Right.
And so the first couple of months and really the first couple of years, we're posting like 6 videos a day on
Mm,
TikTok, 3 on Instagram, 2 on YouTube, over and over again, trying to touch on different pain points that I was feeling during the time that I was gambling. And objectively, a lot of those videos were really shitty. They were not good at all. They were low quality. They were ill thought out. They really weren't saying the right things. But slowly and surely, I started to find what was working. I started to put it together a little bit more. And now it's reached the point that when I put out a video, I have the expectation that every single thing I put out can reach a million people.
it's amazing. And so you being in the space, and expanding your network, and meeting people on all sides of the spectrum. You're meeting operators, you're meeting influencers, you're meeting all these people. I know I've talked to Christina about this. Shout out to Christina, Broke Girl Society. She says that, as people working in the space, we need a seat at the table. I don't know how much I agree with that. Where do you land on the spectrum of, you know, the one end of the spectrum is, we need to see at the table, like there's room for everyone. The other end of the spectrum is these influencers and these operators are criminal. Like where do you land on that?
Mm. I think it really depends on the person or the operator that we're talking about.
Okay.
Because what I think is like more often than not, people that are in positions of being like a responsible gambling operator or like whoever's in charge of the responsible gambling department for the operator, they're usually pretty good people and they're trying to do a good thing, but they're working in a situation that's built for them to fail intentionally. And the same applies for, state councils. I think people that run state councils are heroes and they're doing fantastic things, usually with almost no budget. They're working mostly by themselves, usually. Um, but they have to be gambling neutral or their budget goes away completely. So, what does that mean? That means that we can talk about how to help people that have already developed a problem. We can't talk about the fact that this product might be addictive. This could be dangerous. Like, we're really being reactionary rather than preemptive. And I think it's almost all solely due to funding. So, if someone waved a magic wand and said, here's $100 million to be distributed across all 50 states to combat gambling addiction and gambling harm with no strings attached, we would see a lot of the people that are doing work find more success because now they're not tethered to what they can and cannot say because their money comes from a casino's profits. So, as it currently exists, you need a seat at the table until you're big enough to make your own table. Um,
Mm,
I've played decently nice with almost everyone. Somehow, still made more enemies than I thought I would make. But I've
yeah.
played decently nice. My personal opinions are what they are. And as I continue to grow, I'm going to have less and less fear about what I can and cannot say. But I'm always someone that says what I want to say,
Mm,
sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
yeah.
But yeah, once you get to be large enough that you can't be ignored, you can start saying things that can really make waves.
Yeah. Love that. So do you think that, you know, do you think that gambling is it is it on, I mean, this might be a dumb question, but like, have we not even scratched the surface yet of gambling addiction, or do you think we're kind of in the eye of the storm right now, or do you think there's still a lot more coming?
I think it's really interesting, and what a lot of the like pro gambling lobbyists are going to be talking about is the fact that the number of people signing up to sports books is beginning to plateau. So what we're seeing is like we saw this big boom as all states are legalizing sports betting, where everyone's starting to sports bet, right? Sports betting is the new talk of the town. I think there's one thing that's going to cause exponentially more damage. That's going to be sports betting is going to be basically the gateway drug to, which has always existed in New Jersey since online gambling, which is the online casino.
Mm,
So I think that in terms of the number of people that are going to experience gambling harm in America, we are just getting started because the large majority of the states don't have online casino. They call it iGaming to try to make it sound more like it's a video game, but
yeah.
it's essentially just a slot machine in your pocket. That's going to be like putting crack into the hands of every single American. Whereas sports betting is like putting a joint. You can still get addicted to it and it can lead you to start doing crack, I guess. But it's like, I think sports betting is going to be the one click away from iGaming. And iGaming is where they're going to pocket hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars off of American gamblers,
Wow. All right. So yeah, we're just getting warmed up then.
unfortunately.
Yeah. So last question. You being, oh, and by the way, when you had your mom managing your finances at 24, my dad was doing it for mine at 38, so you were way ahead of the game. but
Dude, look at us, just some lady killers over here.
um, my last question is, because you know, you're from the younger demographic, and you were more recently out there where a lot of this online stuff was still happening. So I answer the hotline. um, if someone calls 1-800-GAMBLER in like the New England area, I answer it. And over the last, like, I'd say 6 months, the majority of the people calling, they're not gamblers. They are parents
Mm,
of kids that are gambling. And, I usually tell them, depending on the conversation, but it always ends up coming back to bailouts, right? Like, whatever you do, the worst thing you can do is bail them out. They're going to lie to you. They're going to tell you they need the money for all kinds of different things. I promise you it's for gambling.
mm.
So, don't do it. Easier said than done, obviously. But my question to you is, what is the advice to the parents out there that have an inkling? that their kids might have a problem. There's been little red flags like, oh, Johnny had $2,000 from graduation. Now it's gone. I know he sports bets a little bit, but like he couldn't have lost $2,000, could he? What is your advice to not only the parents, but also, I mean, I guess if you're an 18-year-old kid and you're listening to this right now, like, and you think that you have it under control,
Yeah.
what's your advice to them?
It's so hard to give advice to parents knowing that I don't have kids.
Mm,
But what I like that you added to the 18-year-old who's listening to this, because I feel like we're most qualified to help the person that we used to be. And so what I hope that my answer can do is kind of like shed light on what decisions the parents might end up making.
mm,
But what I would say is there's very, very little that anyone could have ever said to me that would have gotten me to stop gambling. But experiencing the amount of loss and pain that I inflicted on myself, there were plenty of times over the course of 6 years where had I known the truth, those low points might have been enough to stop me. And so I hate the phrase planting the seeds just because I say it so much. I wish I could come up with a better phrase. But like if you're a parent and you go up to your 18-year-old kid who just who just won a bunch of money and you tell them they need to stop gambling, there's no way in hell that kid's going to stop gambling. But if that kid then goes on to lose all of those winnings and he's at a low point, then having that conversation ahead of time with that kid might get him to say, okay, maybe they were right. Maybe they
exactly.
were right is so much more valuable than, okay, I'll listen to you. You have to let people get there themselves. And so I guess my advice to anyone is to talk about it, as dumb as that, and easier said than done. If you're not talking about it, it's going to continue to be hidden. And if it's hidden, they're going to ride the ups and downs. But in my case, no one ever stepped in and said, hey, I think you have a problem. And so when I would have losses, I would just think I made some bad decisions, not I'm a gambling addict, which would
Right.
lead me to continue to try again. So planting the seed that, hey, this could be becoming a problem, maybe it gets them there 3 years sooner than it would have without planting that seed.
Yeah. And like to your point, I had so many people in my life telling me I had a problem, telling me to get help, but it was too late at that point. I was 10
Mhm.
years in, right? I had all those memories of wins and the disease was so powerful at that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, like maybe taking that hard line, zero enabling early on, maybe that does make a difference. And I
Mhm.
once again, but what about the 18-year-old kid who can place a bet once a month and like they're fine? Like, okay, yeah, I guess they are fine. Just like I can have a drink once in a while. But for the kid that can't, if you as the parent, whether they win, lose, or draw, tell them they shouldn't do it, and then like you said, I guarantee you lose that money, and then they do, maybe, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's a battle we're gonna keep fighting, my friend.
Yeah, every single day. Got more
Yep.
recordings after this. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I got one tonight. Um, Rob, I can't thank you enough, not only for today, but just I've had some great conversations with you over the last few months. Hope to continue to have those, and look forward to having you back on the Modern Meeting sometime down the road.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
All right,
Thanks for having me.
appreciate it, Rob. We'll be right back.